My family went camping at the start of summer. Just one night. That's all it was supposed to be. We arrived early in the morning, deep in the woods. As we unloaded the car, I felt like we weren't alone. I looked toward the trees and saw something standing far between them. It was tall and it was still, but I knew for a fact it was watching. For a second I thought it looked like a goat standing upright, but when I pointed it out and my parents turned to look, there was nothing there. Later, my brother and I went to collect sticks for the fire, and that's when he screamed. He ran to me and said that he had seen a man with a goat's head staring at him from behind a tree. I was feeling nervous, but as he's my younger brother, I decided to try and deter him from this situation. That night, as we sat around the fire, I heard it. There was breathing. It was slow and heavy, and it was too close. Thinking it might have been me, I held my breath, but the sound did not stop. My parents had shouted to knock it off. When it was a bit later in the night, my brother crawled into my tent. He was shaking. He told me that something had been standing outside his tent, just watching him. Then we heard something. It was scratching. Fingers were being dragged slowly across the fabric. And then the breathing was right outside the tent. After a while, the sounds had stopped. We were too on edge to sleep, so we kinda took it in turns between us to sleep. Once morning had come, we checked outside, and one of the tents was gone. It wasn't torn, it wasn't damaged, it was just gone. Looking at the concerned look on my parents' faces, they all agreed that we need to pack up and leave immediately. We pulled away, and I couldn't help but look outside the window, behind into the woods. And there it was, the figure that I had saw on the first day, watching us leave. Things didn't feel right when we got home. Our indoor lighting began to flicker on and off. Doors were opening by themselves, and we also heard footsteps pacing upstairs while all of us sat in the living room. Every now and again, we would hear that breathing again. Whilst we were all at the dinner table looking at each other, trying to figure out what was going on, all of a sudden, the power had gone out. My dad grabbed a flashlight and went upstairs to investigate. My mum followed him. After waiting for what felt like an hour, our parents never came back down. My brother and I decided to go upstairs, and here's where things got really weird. Our bathroom sink was running, overflowing into the floor, and there were dark handprints stained on the walls. On the mirror, something had appeared to have been scratched into the glass, and it read,
"I followed you home."
My brother and I checked out the rest of the upstairs, and we couldn't find our parents at all. We then thought to come downstairs just in case we may have missed them, but we would have passed them if that was the case. But nonetheless, as they weren't upstairs, The only logical thing we could do was go downstairs. We entered the living room, but then we stopped in our tracks. That's when we saw something was sitting on the sofa. It appeared to be tall, hunched, and its legs appears as if they have been bent the wrong way. Its head looked like a goat's skull stretched over a human face. It had black eyes and a wide, wet smile. As it began to stood up, my brother shook me out of my frozen state, and we ran out of there. We had called the police, and they came to our house to then investigate. They never were able to find our parents, and before they left, one officer in particular came up to us, asking to see the camping photos. And every picture appeared to have the same thing in it. Each time you'd look closely in the background, you can see this thing getting closer each time. The officer then asked us if he can hold on to these photos to aid them in their investigation. We agreed, and then the officer then suggested that he can drive us over to family if there's any nearby. We explained that we have an aunt and uncle living about an hour away, and he gladly took us to see them. Since moving in with my aunt and uncle, we've not ever been able to trace the whereabouts of my parents. We don't even camp anymore. We don't even like trees. Last night, however, I woke up to the sound of breathing beside my bed. And when I looked around, there was no one there. But I noticed that my phone's screensaver was just about to flicker off. Assuming someone had been checking my phone, I opened it to check it. And inside my gallery, there was a new photo. The photo was of me, asleep, and in the dark reflection of the window behind me, something was smiling. One day, my family decided to take a holiday in a cabin deep inside the woods. It took us 2 hours to reach it, and upon arriving, we found a modest structure. There were 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room. My 2 brothers and I claimed the larger bedroom. Outside, our parents wanted a family photograph, so the 3 of us stood beneath a towering tree, smiling at the camera. Later, when I reviewed the picture, my heart stopped. There was someone else in the frame, a figure towering behind us. It appeared to be draped in a dark suit, yet it was entirely faceless. There were no eyes, no mouth, just emptiness. I froze, and my parents never noticed it, nor did my brothers. Dinner passed uneventfully, then my father paused mid-bite to ask about repeated knocking on the door. We weren't sure what he was talking about, and he shrugged it off, muttering that it might have been his imagination. That night, as we lay in bed, we heard a chilling scream tear through the silence. My youngest brother had seen it too. The same faceless man standing near our door. At this point, fear had seeped into every corner of the cabin. I told my brother to keep his eyes shut and pretend nothing existed. Eventually, he managed to sleep, though it was quite uneasy for him. Around 2 in the morning, knocking and the sound of deliberate footsteps woke me. I moved through the cabin cautiously. I checked the kitchen, the living room, but found no one. But here was the unusual thing. The tap and the fridge were both inexplicably open. That's when I felt it. The heavy breathing behind me. I whispered into the darkness, but no one replied. I pressed on, heart hammering, until my parents stirred. The hours passed in tense vigilance. Shadows seemed alive, and I saw movement in the corner of my eye, but it was always figures that were vanishing when I turned. At one point, I heard the slow, deliberate creak of a door, footsteps approaching, and the oppressive weight of being watched. As I hid, each one of my senses were on edge, and that was until the sounds finally receded, and only then could I sleep. When I woke up in the morning, however, there was no relief. The cabin just felt wrong. Every corner carried the memory of the faceless figure. Later on that day, whilst playing football outside, we heard bushes rustling, which then had sent a shiver through us. Shortly afterwards, our parents insisted on another photo. As the shutter clicked, the figure reappeared, closer this time, and it was holding the ball that we had been playing with. Upon the closer inspection, it was obvious that it had no eyes and no face, just a featureless presence in a suit that exuded malice. As the night descended like a shroud, attempts to show our parents proved futile, as the figure would just vanish the moment they'd look at the photo. Eventually, as night carried on and darkness swallowed the cabin, the light started to fail. Doors creaked open and closed on their own, and chilling notes appeared. On one such note, there was a message that had said,
Do not think you are safe. I take children who are careless in the woods.
Panic gripped me. My youngest brother was gone. I searched the cabin, leaving no corner unchecked, but he was nowhere to be found. As my parents awoke, my parents panicked, yet the night continued to deepen. The faceless figure remained, always just beyond reach. How do I know this? Because another photo confirmed it. I took a photo this time. The photo had the window in the background, and there it was, that figure, peering from the window. That was when I heard a scream. My mother had come out to say that my other brother was also missing. This figure grew bolder, approaching with a deliberate, silent menace. At this point, my dad grabbed the phone and called the police. He explained that there was an intruder and his sons were missing. But their response was chilling. They warned us to get up from there and leave immediately, as too many officers had disappeared in similar circumstances in that cabin. At this stage, we don't know what to do. We've left the cabin, obviously, but somewhere deep inside us, we still need to know what's happened to my two brothers. My dad has been relentless with private investigators, but he just keeps coming up short. My mother is beside herself because in one night she lost two of her sons. Every now and again I take a selfie, and yet I can still see that same faceless figure lingering behind us, watching, waiting. It's clearly not finished, and it is still after me. It started the night after a party. Sarah and I had friends over, and when everyone left, we went to bed. I thought I saw her watching me sleep, but I shrugged it off. An hour later, I checked again. She was asleep. As I was up, my stomach started grumbling, so feeling hungry, I went downstairs for dinner. But from the corner of the stairs, I saw her, standing, smiling, and just staring. "Sarah?" I asked. I was shaking, and she didn't respond. When I blinked a couple of times, trying to rub the sleep out of my eyes, she had vanished. I went to check upstairs, and there she was in bed, still asleep. I told myself it was my imagination. But here's the thing. When I was brushing my teeth, I heard knocking. I blurted her name out. "Sarah?" There was no answer, and when I went to open the door, there was no one there. After some back and forth thinking, I decided to go back to bed. I was feeling uneasy, but I told myself it was nothing. The next morning, I started to question Sarah. I asked her about last night, and that's when she looked at me really confused. Her response was, "I don't remember leaving the bed." To say we were both confused was an understatement. I left for work, trying to forget it. But when I looked up from my car, I froze. Sarah was outside, holding a SpongeBob teddy, and she was grinning. She didn't know I worked there. She had never liked SpongeBob either. I decided to call her, and I asked her where she was. Her reply was that she was at home. And then when I looked back up again, both her and the teddy disappeared. This made me question my sanity, but I proceeded into my office anyway. At work, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I picked it up, all I could hear was whispering. "I love SpongeBob." My blood ran cold. I started looking around at the windows. but I couldn't see her anywhere. When I finished work, I began my travel back home, and the first thing that I saw before I even got out the car was the front door was open. I entered slowly and went into the living room, and that's when I saw Sarah watching TV. I asked her if she left the house, and she just looked at me really confused, saying no. That evening, at about 2 a.m, I started to hear laughter. This naturally woke me up, and then when I started looking around, I saw her standing in the doorway again, grinning, holding that same SpongeBob teddy. I screamed, and then she vanished. I got up to have a look around to see what was going on. I couldn't find anything, but that's when I noticed a note on the table, and it was written in messy letters. It said,
I am the teddy. I possess your girlfriend.
Feeling the chills run down the back of my spine, I didn't sleep. I left the next morning and booked a hotel for 2 nights. I was hoping that distance might stop whatever this was, but the calls continued to come. One call had the following whisper: "I will never leave you." I returned home, and once again the front door was wide open. This time, however, it looked dark. It was silent. And upstairs, under my bed, that's where I saw her. She was smiling and holding that teddy, and there was blood trickling down from her mouth. I ran and I called the police immediately. When they arrived on scene to investigate, they found that no one was there. This entire ordeal was weird. Most importantly, I don't know where my girlfriend ever got to. I tried searching for her everywhere. I tried to put some distance away from this house again, and a few months passed while I moved to a new house, when I was thinking that it was finally over. But one night, I heard footsteps. The teddy had appeared at the bottom of the stairs. The phone rang, and then I heard the same whisper: "I never left you." When I turned on the light, there she was, Sarah, standing in the corner with pale black eyes, and she was grinning. But something was wrong. One half of her body flickered. It was like static on a broken TV. She tilted her head, holding the teddy, and that's when I realized the horrifying truth. This thing that had been watching me was mimicking Sarah, learning about Sarah, and even managed to reshape herself as Sarah. I ran outside, and I decided to call the police. When they arrived, they once again did another search, and just like in the previous home, this one was also empty. There was no sign of her. However, the teddy, it was on the front porch, smiling. Many weeks had passed since that incident, and those weeks gradually turned to months. For a while I started to think that maybe my turmoil is actually over. I never saw her ever again. But sometimes, late at night, I do catch a glimpse of her in the corner of my eye, and the teddy is always there. My name is Tommy. I was 13 when this happened. My little brother Ben, he was 10 at the time. It was supposed to be the best week of our lives. Our parents surprised us with a trip to Disney World. No countdown, no waiting, just, we leave tomorrow. Ben and I didn't sleep that night. At the airport, while my parents were checking in, a man had sat down beside us. He looked exhausted, pale, like he hadn't blinked in days. He didn't look at me when he spoke. However, he did say, "Be careful of the mascots." I thought he was joking, so I asked him why. He appeared to have swallowed hard, and then replied, "They don't always leave when the park closes." Before I could ask what that meant, he stood up and walked into the crowd. I never saw him again. However, in hindsight, I wish I had listened. The first day was normal. It was bright, loud, and crowded. We stayed at a hotel just outside the park. My parents took room 346. Ben and I were in room 345. That night after dinner, I stepped into the bathroom to brush my teeth, and that's when I heard it. There was a knock at our door. 3 slow taps. When I opened it, I saw that the hallway was empty. And when I turned back, Ben was sitting on his bed, staring at me. I asked him if he heard the knock, and that's when he shook his head no. I told myself it was someone else down the hall. When I went to close the door, there were 3 fresh handprints on the outside, and they were too large to be a kid's. The next day in the park, I noticed the first mascot watching us. It was Mickey. He stood near a popcorn stand, not waving, not posing for photos, just standing there, facing us. That's when I nudged Ben. I asked him if he saw that. When he looked up, he agreed that he did. We must have looked away for maybe 2 seconds, distracted by a stroller bumping into us. When we looked back, Mickey was closer. He wasn't walking, he was just closer, about 20 feet away now. No one else seemed to notice. Dad said we were being paranoid. We kept walking ahead, but every time I checked behind us, Mickey had moved. I never caught him in motion, but he was just always somewhere new, and more specifically, a little nearer each time. That night was when the mirror happened. While Ben was asleep, I went to the bathroom around midnight. The lights flickered once, and then they steadied. When I looked into the mirror, I felt that strange drop in my stomach, like missing a step on the stairs. Behind me, reflected in the glass, Mickey stood in the doorway. I spun around, but there was nothing there. I turned back to the mirror, and now he was closer, right behind me. I could see dark smears across the gloves, along the chin, something thick and almost black in the dim light. His head tilted slowly to one side. I couldn't move. I felt frozen. And that's when the bathroom light shut off. It did so for just a second, and when it came back on, I was alone. However, the mirror wasn't clean anymore. Written across the glass in something dark and streaked, it said,
"You left him alone."
As I wiped it with a towel, it smeared red. I didn't tell Ben. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't want it to be real. The third day, a family vanished. That's exactly how the staff phrased it. Unexpected early checkout. It was a family in the room across from ours. I remember seeing their little girl at the pool. That night, their door was open. I could see the lights were on and the beds were unmade, and even the suitcases were still there. However, no staff would ever answer questions. That evening, we saw 3 mascots standing at the far end of the hotel lobby. They weren't entertaining guests. They weren't posing. They were just standing in a line, watching the elevators. Ben squeezed my hand, and he whispered to me that they are waiting, and I looked back at him and asked him what for. He simply didn't answer back. That night, I woke up to the sound of our door opening. There was no knocking, just creaking open. I sat up, and the room was dark, except for the hallway light spilling across the carpet. That's when I saw it. A tall silhouette stood in the doorway. It had round ears and white gloves. Ben was still asleep in the other bed. However, this figure had stepped inside. It didn't walk like a person. It shifted. One moment, it was near the door. The next, it was halfway across the room. It wasn't fast. It wasn't blurred. It was just wrong. It was like frames missing from a video. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The head turned towards Ben, and the lights flickered. Next thing I know, the figure was gone and the door was closed. I looked over to Ben's bed, and what I saw made me afraid. It was empty. I ran to my parents' room. They didn't believe me at first, but that was until we checked the hallway. 3 doors down, another room was wide open. As we peered inside, it was another family that had gone. There was no luggage missing. There was no sign of struggle, just absence. When we questioned security, they said that they saw nothing unusual on the cameras. But I saw something they didn't. In the reflection of the lobby's polished floor, behind the officer talking to my dad, there were 4 mascots stood near the entrance, watching us. When I blinked, they were all gone. My dad told my mum that we had to leave and not to risk my life as well as Ben's. He tried to calm her down and assured her that he will look into this. My mum has not spoken since. 3 months after I lost my brother, my mum had disappeared too. From our house, there didn't appear to be any forced entry, nor were there signs of anything wrong, except the bathroom mirror. Dad found the message. He tried stopping me from seeing it and told me to go to bed. Later, I took a sneak peek, and it said,
"You keep leaving them."
I don't go near theme parks anymore. I don't watch commercials. But sometimes, late at night, I think about something. The mascots never chased us. They never ran, never attacked. They just waited. And every time we looked away, they were closer. If you ever go to Disney and you see a mascot standing still, not performing, not moving, just watching, don't assume it's a break. And whatever you do, don't look away. If you are based in the UK and would like to enjoy freshly batch roasted coffee delivered to your door, visit vitalcoffee.co.uk and use the coupon code mrfreakystory to get 10% off from all products. I will leave a link in the description below.